son. Where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
Oh my God, that's amazing. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, and we're back again. We have finally done it. We said we were going to do this for a long time, and here we are doing it. We're going to talk about the follow-up to American Cosmic Encounters, and here to lead that conversation with a very detailed set of notes is Kaylin Boosalis.
Thank you for having me back, James. It's good to be here.
We've been talking about doing this for a minute, and I'm super excited, especially with just like the general sentiment. Like, this is really picking up steam from when you told me about Diana Walsh Pasulka and her interpretation of this. Was what, like a year ago?
Yeah,
it was literally the day after the wedding, right? Exactly. Yeah. So about a year ago. Within that year, this portion of the conversation, the religion, NHI, UFO overlap, it has gotten ridiculous. So I guess just where do we start here? Let's go to the notes.
Yeah, well,
Okay, let's go to the notes.
I actually have a quote that I thought that I would start with.
Yeah, let's do it. So
actually, I want to do a quote from Jacques Vallee, because as I said to you the last time we spoke, I'm almost embarrassed we didn't go through Invisible College before all of Diana's work, because Jacques Vallee, who wrote The Invisible College back in the 70s, was really the one who laid a lot of groundwork. And she does talk about a lot of things that he said. And he says on page 173 of the book, I think the stage is set for the appearance of new faiths centered on the UFO belief. So he said that in 1975. So it's been almost 50 years since he published this book, and it laid the groundwork for a lot of the things that we are talking about today. So I guess we can start with maybe talking about where Encounters picks up from where American Cosmic sort of left off.
Yeah, and I definitely, like, I'm glad that you're reminding me to bring up Invisible College, because I just finished it. Like, I took that book to the face, audiobook, the past 2-3 days.
What do you think?
It was great, and I honestly, I liked The Invisible College a lot in the sense that it referenced other obscure topics that I'm into, in particular the esoteric. Like, that's a little bit more of a focus. And one of the things like that really fucked me up while I was listening to that book is, like, he wrote this in the 70s. When did he fucking write this? It's crazy. 75.
Yeah, the copyright.
It's crazy. That he, but really it was like him and a handful of other people that really were involved in all of the obscure Skinwalker Ranch and Raytheon, or not Raytheon, but Bigelow. Like, there's a whole bunch of like UFO lore that he's involved in, and there's again like a growing. Now we're knowing that there's a whole lot more people who are legitimately doing this science, and back then this book is a little more frustrating in the sense that it's like, and this random person who's an informant but won't give me their name or any information. So I kind of liked Encounters a little bit more in that respect, that like these people, she was talking about tangible people that you can look up, and you can look up the things that they're doing.
Yeah, for the most part, there are some folks who we still can't know about, or we weren't given like last names to or that, but a lot of people have come forward, like we now know. And I think I said this last time on the pod, Gary Nolan, we know, was one of the characters that was in the book. I think James Madden also had come forward, though I don't know if he was given an alias in the book. But yeah, she draws from a lot of different scientific disciplines to try and understand the phenomenon, and then she brings her religious expertise and acumen to the table as well.
Yeah, it's just, it still is like really fucking with me how much this has become a topic in the past year. It's just really crazy that this particular analysis of this whole thing is kind of taking the center stage. So yeah, let's pick up where American Cosmic leaves off.
Yeah, so a little bit of background in case no one listened to the last episode that I did with you. Diana Walsh Pasulka was the head of religious studies at North Carolina University. I watched a podcast or a video podcast of her today, and I guess she's no longer the chair there. But I'm a huge fan of her work, and I hope that I can do a modicum of justice to all the work that she's done. Maybe someday she'll get to be on your pod and speak for herself. But
she would hate that, I'm sure.
No, she would be great. So American Cosmic, right, talks, it's almost like three buddies go in the desert to kind of live X-Files a little bit. It's kind of
is.
Yeah, it's kind of her story. It's her story and testimonial of moving from being purely religious studies into being pulled into this study of the phenomenon through a variety of different angles of folks wanting her expertise, because I guess through, back channels or whatever, they all learned that they need the religious studies aspect inside of things to understand the phenomenon more completely. And to go on that a little bit, when we pick up where we left off, she kind of reintroduces some of the characters again and talks a little bit about the research, but I felt that this book went much, much more into her religious studies. There was much more talk about demons and angels, much more talk about people with, who interact with said demons and angels. Is it a phenomenon? Is it not? And she makes it very clear that these phenomena are real, that the angels are real entities, that aliens are real entities, which can be kind of mind-blowing to conceptualize because we haven't seen them, right? They haven't made themselves. They haven't walked onto the White House lawn and been like, hello, humans, we're here. But people in the know, there is a hierarchy, and she talks about this in the book, a hierarchy of people and non-people who sort of rank in an order. It goes something, it's like God, angels, extraterrestrials, intelligence community, ordinary people, and animals. And I made sure to pull that out, and I was like, oh wow, that's a very specific hierarchy. Not wealthy people, not good people. It's that the intelligence community ranks above ordinary citizens. And what's cool is in the book, she dives into a little bit more of that. She interviews children. She calls them children of the invisibles, right? There's that chapter where she interviews a woman who is a daughter of a very high-ranking intelligence officer, and the woman talks about how her life was just erased. She goes, they were in a strawberry patch or something picking strawberries, and Diana's taking photos of the kids, and her friend says, that's so fun we get to do that. I don't have any photos from my childhood. It's like, what? It's just very strange. So there's an invisibility to this as well that's beyond the phenomenon. It is an invisibility of the people who study it so that they are able to maintain secrecy. And then even from within those pools of children, they're screened to see, like, can I go into this, intelligence lifestyle and that. It's generational too. They kind of pass things down. So I found this book to really be, I said, it's deepening the study of the UFO myth. And myth and religion, in Diana's view, as she has talked about, are kind of interchangeable, right? Like when we talk about another people's religion, we say, oh, their myths are XYZ. Well, any religion that we know today could be the same thing. It's an observance, it's a belief and then a practice of those things that are, giving, genuflecting to myth, or to kind of give things up toward the myths that people believe in. So, it really reframes a lot of the things that she kind of talks about in American Cosmic. So yeah, I loved the book. I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, I again, I'm just a huge fan of talking about tangible shit and all of the scientists and people doing like legitimate research that is scientific, but it's on the fringes of what normal science would accept.
Right.
Again, it does just trip me out thinking that this was going on. It doesn't surprise me, but it trips me out that imagine like the pressure that Jacques Vallee must have been under printing that book. Like, now it's okay to talk about these things in the open the way that we are. Back then, people fucking died for sure for revealing how, depending on what it was, a state secret of some kind. So,
and that's why I'm so curious how he's still able. I mean, he's still very much in the conversation, and Jacques Vallee appears in a really prominent way in encounters, and I don't think that that's just happenstance. I mean, I think it's a nod to how much work that he did with the research, because she pulls a lot from him. You talked about technology. I feel like that might be a great place to take this to next, because there's a lot of things that she talks about with regard to the text. So she says, technology is a way of interpreting and understanding what seems magical and imperceivable, right? So through AI, which is a huge topic of hers that she goes into, she's saying AI is going to potentially remove those redactions, which you're talking about, removing the redactions of things that we're not allowed to know about, so that information is going to kind of potentially make its way in a much wider space, without any sort of red line through it. So we might have access to a lot more things than we could even be aware of right now once AI sort of comes to the fore. Also, she says that governments and researchers focus a lot on hard science, which is what you're talking about, right? So we want to understand this through numbers and physically touching things and things like that. However, the governments focus on hard science and assume they are dealing with crafts that work within the framework of traditional physics. The supernatural and paranormal aspects of the phenomenon were and are still largely ignored. And that's sort of where she comes in, right? Because religion is where hard science kind of can pick up, where they leave off a little bit.
Well, I mean, it had to. And it really, if you look about like the evolution of science, it emerges out of practices of the church with the changing sentiment. And, the overlap there, to me, it's crazy, because I still just wonder if it's not. I don't think AI is going to be able to set us free in the same way, because it's going to be controlled, is being controlled. But there is an element to this whole thing, and she makes this argument pretty well in both books. It's not America's right to disclose.
Correct.
Right, this information is going to get out at some point. It is incredible that as much hasn't leaked that has, or what has been allowed to leak has been allowed to leak. But I don't. At some point, we're going to reach a critical mass here where we just can no longer deny that something is occurring, and the proverbial landing on the White House lawn, like we'll get that. It might not be a landing on the White House lawn, but it might be unavoidable shit occurring in the sky. I don't know. Shit is just getting so crazy every day.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point. She says, like you said, it's not America's secret to keep, right? So if global governments decide that they want to release the information, and we have seen that, there's going to be a doorway that will be open by which no one's going to be able to shut it. And you and I have also talked about the timing of the information release is always, and it usually coincides when it can be buried, when it's not going to be the focal point. There's something else much bigger. I was actually surprised that not more UAP information had come out during all of the stuff happening with, Trump's assassination attempt and that, because there was so much in the media that's a good time for media to kind of put some stories in that they're like, we don't want this to be the main thing. Let's just kind of kill the story a little bit. That sample of Lou Elizondo's book kind of overlaps, but the whole reason I sent that is because, so Jacques Vallee, he's a prominent figure. He's included in a lot of the related programs that are like not necessarily UFO, UAP, but like tangentially related, and was like the government was using him on these studies as a scientist. Him, and there's another guy, Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff did all the work with remote viewing with Russell Targ. Yes.
There's like these weird, strange a small number of old guys who have been involved, who actually have had access to all the different interlacing programs. And that's why I'm still trying to decode, what does Jacques Vallee mean when the best way to understand this is understanding the history of Satan? And I'm of two minds here, but go ahead.
No. Well, I was going to say, so you segued perfectly into the next quote that I wanted to read. We're right on the same page. So we talked about how governments are focused on hard science and why they need religion to understand this phenomenon. And they say research into the UFO phenomenon benefits from a religiously informed interpretive framework, because many people who see UFOs and experience supernatural or unwanted paranormal events feel that these entities they see are evil or divine.
Right.
And so because there's an emotional association with it, they need that framework to understand what it is that they are encountering, right?
Yeah.
But what were you going to say? You're of two minds. What are they?
Well, there's the mind that's religion is this thing that exists to worship whatever that is, or that thing exists and religion is there to block us away from that thing. You know, we're gonna get some more details about this at some point, but the Italy UFO crash, Vatican, churches involved. The church would have been the arbiters of this information. And another thing that's been tripping me out, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but I've been spazzing over the correlation between esoteric images and what is known of contactees, like the images on alien ships. So again, did we create religion to worship these things? Or was religion put in place to make sure we thought it was a man in the sky? You know what I mean? Like that's what I keep going back and forth over. Now, full disclosure, neither of us have finished A History of Satan, so maybe we'll know by the end of the time we're reading it. But that is another book that was written in like the fucking 1400s. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, 1800s by Carmelite nuns. Yeah. To speak to what you're saying, so in Diana's interview I listened to today, she was talking about the history of, in her case, it's Christianity. I mean, she's both a practicing Catholic as well as her studies are through the veil of Catholicism. So I want to preface that too when we're talking about the minutia of the religion that she's speaking to. And she says in the beginning, this idea of Jesus, right, or Christ bringing a message was really to give autonomy and dignity to the small person who didn't have money, who didn't have a lot. And then as this movement, it's like the Romans crucifying Christians wasn't enough. They were still practicing, right? So they're like, oh shit, well, we can't murder all. That religion was too good. Yeah. They're like, we can't murder all the slaves. So then Constantine and, what was it, the Gathering of Nicaea or something, they're the ones who then indoctrinate the Bible to be what it is, and they kind of absorb it and adopt it. And that's that strategy to absorb religion has been employed for many, many years. So in the case to which you're speaking of, I think that religion as we know it is a governmentally controlled, it's psyops. It's been psyops for thousands of years. Yeah. Basically, it's a way of controlling people. But I think that the nucleus of what inspired the religion is maybe a really beautiful thing, and something like a paranormal experience or something that was channeled by worshiping or enacting certain protocols. Protocols are talked about a lot in this book and in American Cosmic, particularly with the character Tyler D, who does not make as big of an appearance in Encounters. He kind of dropped off working with Diana because she starts working with a new character whose alias is Gray Man. And Gray Man has experienced abductions, and I have to look at my notes for more of his story because I don't remember all of it off the top of my head, but starts with the abduction thing and then, talks to her more about that, and is an Australian citizen who comes over and is bringing artifacts with him to study, and Tyler was like, if you work with him, I can't work with you. So there's a lot of things she can't say. So there's stuff that I don't know about because I don't know who Tyler is and I don't know what the fight was about and whatever, but she kind of shifts her focus. So Tyler doesn't figure as strongly in encounters, but Gray Man is a huge part of the discussion point.
Just so you and all the listeners are aware, if you want to know more about Tyler D, you can look into a character named Chris Bledsoe, who's the guy I told you about earlier. Chris Bledsoe worked with him and has divulged his name on many podcasts. So, yeah.
I don't even know it. Sorry.
Yeah, he is a known person, and he's legit. Like that Tyler D is fucking legit.
Who is it?
Yeah, here, let me get it.
Okay, while you get it up, while you work on pulling that up, I'm going to talk about one quote that was in both Encounters and in Invisible College that I think is the most important quote, one of the most important we'll say tonight. So Diana says, belief has nothing to do with something that is true. And Jacques Vallee says, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. And that's not just true for the phenomenon, it's true for misinformation, it's true for fear-mongering and, governmental things and war and all of that. So that's, I think, a really, really important quote to bring into the conversation when we talk about the phenomenon. But I was like, belief has nothing to do with something that is true. It's like, whew, okay.
Well, but, again, the second quote, just because you don't believe is true, if someone believes is true, there can be consequences.
Yes.
That's something I think about all the time. Just because we all want peace, there's probably somebody out there who doesn't want peace. I'm trying to look at this guy's name. Tyler's identity has been found. I'm pretty sure his name is Tim Taylor. Yeah, not even kidding you. His name is Tim Taylor. Hang on one second. And you can look him up.
I will.
Yeah, you really should. But he is legit. And I will pull this window up here. He sits on a couple companies.
Oh, in the biologics. Yes.
That's one of his books. But this is the guy.
Wow. Yeah, so biologics was another topic that is very big in Encounters. You might want to pull up the definition of biologics for your listeners, but in a nutshell, what Diana was not able to talk about in the writing of the book that she's been able to discuss in subsequent interviews, because it's more open now, has been the work that biologics has done, which is, it's like you can send cells or viruses or things into space and kind of do the research to see how things grow. So it's like stem cell, etc. It's just a way of trying to figure out how to use medication that's not, like chemically based. It's more based in like organics and that. So, or like in organisms, like derivatives of organisms. I think they said like Botox is an example. I might be wrong on that, but I was like, oh, interesting. So it's like different types of medication or medicine that might work better or differently or be more organic as opposed to these chemical kind of substrates and that. So fascinating.
Yeah, it's trippy. It's super trippy, and I think ultimately they probably had their falling out because it was getting too close to him being outed, and then he got outed. So he's definitely not going to be talking. But it's so stupid because now like it is documented, and it was even documented in Vallee's book, but. It is known. The science is going on. These people are real. They're conducting real science. They're being given strange pieces of materials by the government and told to figure out, like, what is the deal with this? Mm-hmm. Why can we still not talk about it? And, that opens up many... Okay, so... The reason I sent you that thing earlier about Lou Elizondo's book is because the dissenters, the detractors from this being a real thing are now saying that there are people who are obsessed from a religious standpoint with this UFO thing, and they're using taxpayer money to try and capture this thing within the realm of a religious experience as opposed to like some kind of scientific thing that could benefit the the world or whatever. And there is some credence to that, because there are some definitely hardliner motherfuckers in the government who are Christian as shit, and they see their role in the government as trying to advance the agenda of whatever their religion is. But the real point that I'm trying to make here is that a lot of these characters, you know, I used to think that they were totally wrong. I used to think these beings were coming from other planets. That was the thing. And if you thought it was religion, you were crazy. Yeah. But I'm becoming more willing to entertain that maybe there is like a extra dimensional and religious component to it, or might I say spiritual component to it. I don't necessarily think any particular religion has the correct lens, but you know, all the religions that have emerged are just how different people have interpreted those experiences over time.
I also
what do you think?
I would agree with that. I think that it speaks also to the hierarchy of beings that they kind of talked about as well, right? So there can be different levels of beings that you communicate with, some of which could be kind of multidimensional, you know, things that are coming through portals to this planet, things that are maybe off planet. The big thing that Diana talked about, again, in the podcast, videocast, whatever I watched today, was she said, we're probably interacting with their technology, not with the actual organic beings. Yeah. In the same way that she goes, remove the semantics of this if you think we've landed on Mars, but we've sent rovers to Mars, right? So if something was alive on Mars, it would be interacting with the drones that humans put on Mars, not with humans themselves. Yeah. And that's not to say that their AI isn't biologic. This again gets back to the biologics discussion. What can you send through space? You know, if they have something that's like a replicating AI, right, that has a physical form but that is AI, and has figured out how to procreate, or is experimenting on us to figure out how to procreate, right? Those are all, there's a myriad of things that it could be. And all I know for a fact is the closer you get to saying you think you know what it is, the farther you are off base.
Yeah, I feel like that's with most things. I feel like that's with most things. People who say they know the most are usually the people that know the least.
Right. So for all this, even for reality, it's a reminder that everything at best is an approximation. And our technology and our tools get us closer and closer. So, for example, you, James, let's say you were standing on the edge of a building, right? So to judge the distance from you to the ground, you've got your eyes that you can look down. You can kind of perceive and approximate it. But if someone were to give you like a ruler, right, or a way of measuring the distance, then you've got way more detail and information for like how far you are off the ground, right? So technology is just a way for us to continue to try to glean and understand our surroundings in a more accurate way, but we'll never actually know anything. Another quote that I absolutely loved with regard to the hard science was talking about how hard science wants non-human intelligences to have a material existence. However, hard science cannot even explain how or where matter actually exists.
Yeah, we're still working on that one.
Yeah. So yeah, it's well and good to be like, well, I haven't seen the alien land in front of me, and it's like, well, you're just a bunch of zeros and ones anyway. So like, what are you looking for? Because humans in this form, as we exist, we have 5 senses, and we are evolved to live and work on this planet, right? So if something is unlike the biology that we are accustomed to seeing, we're probably not going to see it. It's like that famous story of there's a tribe or something, there's a boat that's coming toward their island.
It was when the conquistadors were going to South America.
Yes, thank you. And they say, I didn't even see the boats. And it's like, it's because it wasn't in their realm of what was real. So the same thing can be, applied to most humans, and dovetails perfectly into another topic that was really prescient in the book, and I think is really important and the coolest thing to me, and that is epigenetics. And epigenetics has to do with the study of how environmental factors can change the chemicals attached to genes, which in turn affects how genes are expressed, and can speak to why some individuals, such as maybe mediums or people who are, remote viewers, are able to perceive these visitors or these non-human entities, whereas other people are not, right?
Well, okay, so this is interesting. So the more that I look into this, the more I realize that, yes, a lot of the people that work in these programs, their whole life had some kind of like advanced ability to imagine shit in their mind. It's engineer shit. And, I've always wondered too, is it like a whole genetic thing? In this book, they talk about kind of sourcing the kids. A funny story of that, the guy I had on the podcast, that Dr. Stephen Ross guy,
yes.
His dad was an engineer for Lockheed, like working on advanced aerospace shit. And now he has, from like 17 on, he had prophetic dreams. And I asked him on the pod, I was like, do you think you're like predispositioned to that? Or, but anyways, yeah, I feel like it's not a surprise that people find themselves in those fields because they're using their brain in a different way. They're using a brain in a much more advanced conceptual way than most average people are for any kind of random thing. So I don't know. I'm fully on board for that kind of being genetic, or that ability being, or some people just being genetically predisposed to being better at it if they pursued it.
Definitely. And in most of the gifted mediums and psychics that I've spoken to are folks who have, again, maybe that's turned on for them after having encountered something, right? They're like, I can't explain it, but something very weird is happening to me now after this strange situation. It's like I said, it's either that they're genetically predisposed or something turns on or off in them. And there's, a thought in the UFO community that potentially the purpose of the phenomenon is to help drive human evolution, or help to curate it or put bumpers on it, basically, because interacting with that phenomenon shapes the trajectory of where it is that we are going as well.
Yeah, I will be interested to find out as years go by and things get declassified. Like, it will be interesting to see what levels of the technology we use now, just as a whole on the human race, like what things we have inherited, or what major breakthroughs actually were attributed to these things. Because, again, like, realizing there were scientists doing real science, also knowing that somewhere in a fucking bunker somewhere there are other motherfuckers doing real science. There's got to be many things that have been gleaned from it, and there's probably like innocuous items that all of us use that like came from some strange UFO discovery, or like extraplanetary. That whole thing is like the argument for semiconductors and all that has already been made a long time ago, and it's a valid point. Fiber optics. There's a lot of people who say fiber optics. Velcro. Like, there's people have said some crazy shit.
I think Tyler D talks about how iPhones were channeled off of an artifact. I'm fairly positive. And also she mentions that there's the picture in American Cosmic of how Apple used references to 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? They put the cell phone as the
obelisk.
The obelisk, yeah. Like the brick, the obelisk.
There's a funny anecdote about 2001 too. When Stanley Kubrick was writing that, he actually like got together with a bunch of physicists and space scientists, and was like, if an alien race was going to colonize the universe, how would they do it? And the scientists kind of agree ultimately on, they'd send out a bunch of drones to set up factories on moons, to make more drones, to send out factories to other moons to make more drones. So, I think that's probably right. We're not interfacing with them. We're interfacing with their technology. And honestly, majority of it is probably a very advanced form of AI. Like, we're just like kind of peering into the future. And I've been coming across a lot lately two things. The reason that people like Tyler supposedly are not wanting to discuss these topics on top of secrecy, like what they could discuss, they still don't want to even acknowledge that they're a part of it. There's like two theories that I've been thinking about that I've heard recently. And one is they don't want to... What's the best way to phrase this? They've made a pact with the others that they can't talk about it.
Yes.
That's like one of the things that has been floated, is that they're
Tyler D struck. Tyler D says the phenomenon is not supposed to be known, and that was why he couldn't work with her when she went and worked with Gray Man. She says that in the book. And like this shit is getting, like, when he was working on this with her in American Cosmic, no one cared. Now, in the past year, is like everyone gives a fuck about it. Or Yeah,
I guess really in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, she was on Joe Rogan fairly recently too. I was like, oh man, once I saw she was on Rogan. And it's cute because I've seen her interviewed. Oh gosh, I've seen her interviewed on a lot of different shows and a lot of different podcasts. And you could hear in her voice, she was so nervous. He's like, you all right? She's like, you have a lot of listeners. There's a lot of people I'm going to reach with this. And it has to be incredibly isolating and vulnerable. And that, I've spoken to friends of mine who have YouTube channels and who have big followings, and it's hard. It's hard being a public figure. And she's an academic. I mean, she said something too. She's like, a lot of people do not want to be associated with this phenomenon because it is so stigmatized, and then people are also so you're being stigmatized and harassed for being right at the same time. It's the worst of all of it. Like, why are we doing this podcast? Why are you and I? Why are we talking about this? We should be harassed.
I've been harassed for my viewpoints forever, so now I just don't care.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more sensitive about that stuff still. I mean, my friends give me crap, but I think anyone with any modicum of curiosity is like open to having the conversation, because we don't know.
And it's getting to the point now where it's like something's going on. I maybe it's not aliens, but something's going on, because that it is becoming clearer and clearer that there is a massive fucking infrastructure. That like none of like real people doing real science that is really cutting edge shit, and we're not allowed to even fucking mention it.
Yeah,
I don't know, strange, but there's that they don't want the aliens are going to be pissed if we tell them about it. And I found that one to be exceptionally stupid, because I feel like that one's just a retort to speak for the if we tell the people, they're going to lose their minds. If we tell people, so society's going to collapse. Like, that's no longer working, because crazy shit happens every day. Society keeps rolling along.
Well, but there's something specific though too. There's society, and then there's 501c3 religion. So when you right. So if you give people an ontological shock, right? Ontology being the way that people metaphysically understand their universe. If people are suddenly faced and confronted with the fact that, in the words of Nietzsche, like God is dead, right? Or that this whole thing that they've been praying to or thinking about was all brought to the fore, not by a god, like a wizard that sits on a cloud, but like by an off-planet terrestrial being. I think there's a lot of people that might be really upset about it. Someone definitely would want to kill it, someone else would want to eat it, and someone else would want to sleep with it. You know what I mean? It's just like, so in that way, there's a great episode, I think I might have mentioned this on the last pod, but this idea of the ontocalypse, right? So people are going to have this huge ontological shock. That's why I think like what you're doing with the podcast is so important. It's like kind of softballing the conversation on the fringes before people are going to be like, holy crap, did you know this thing is happening? And it's like, yeah, we're slowly
been talking about it my whole life.
Yeah, right. But it's like slowly trying to bring people into the conversation about things like you and I have known since we knew each other back in Nebraska, and it's like, So, but not everyone is sensitive to it. Not everyone can perceive it, and not everyone takes it seriously. And also sometimes people are like, oh, that's so something we don't talk about. I'm not even going to entertain that notion because I don't want to be a weirdo, you know?
Yeah, well, it's way cooler to be a weirdo, I guess.
I agree. I mean, we have to get over it at this point, but yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, because you were talking about the phenomenon not wanting to be known. Jacques Vallee Jacques Vallee in Invisible College says something I thought that was really interesting. I want to find it real quick. I had it. Oh, there are 3 types of cover-up with the UFO phenomenon. Number 1, the fact that pressure is placed on the witnesses to discourage them from telling their story by the government. Number 2, the fabrication of explanations like swamp gas, right, and that when a witness does speak. And number 3 is the built-in silencing mechanism of the phenomenon itself. Like people have said, like in his book, there were folks who were like, yeah, the phenomenon planted the thought in my head, like, you will forget about this, and when you speak about it, it won't be intelligent, and no one will believe you, right? So, yeah, the phenomenon seeks to protect itself as well.
Yeah, and again, like that very well could be the case. I really, it's just really this whole watching how this shit is playing out is really, really fun, because there's no telling what's going to happen. And the more I honestly think all of the things are in play. I think the government is definitely seeding misinformation. Yeah. I think they're deliberately putting shit out that is not true about this subject for a point. There is some shit. There is some shit from other planets. There is some shit in extra-dimensional. There is a hierarchy. All of these things are now becoming more and more like, well, that's now not so unbelievable, depending on which person you want to ascribe to. There's still obviously a lot of shit that isn't, but, I think the average person has now gotten over the idea that maybe we're not alone in the universe. I think the average person is now at that point. But will they be able to stomach that the person they thought was in a human image is actually an insect from another planet? I don't know. It's like that episode of South Park where they go to the Vatican and they meet all the different galactic Catholic priests from all the different planets.
Totally. Well, there's also something to be said too. One thing that I think Diana talks about is compare what's happening with the human interaction with the phenomenon to an animal interacting with humans, right? So if we're doing a study on a species of animal and we tranquilize it, that animal is terrified when it's tranquilized. It thinks it's going to be killed. It's terrified of what the takers of it are trying to do to it. Now, if it's a scientist taking the animal, it's probably an okay thing. It's not trying to hurt the animal, it's trying to study it, but it has to do something harmful that could be perceived as evil to get what it needs from the animal. Now, a poacher, still a human, but a poacher going to the animal is going to kill it. So here's the same species of hierarchically higher order beings doing something maybe harmful, but with different intentions behind it. I would argue that, and the books would argue that abductions and interactions with the phenomenon are not inherently good or bad. It simply might be a byproduct of what the phenomenon needs from its interaction with these lower dimensional or lower order beings. And it might not see humans as anything worth being nice to. It's like, nope, it's a creature I'm studying. I'm going to just take it and do what I need to with it. And it's not evil or not evil. It's we only know half of the story. There's actually, one more thing to say too that I think is important. And this is from Vallee's book. He does an example talking about the phenomenon as a thermostat, which is incredible. So, where is it here? That's LDWP. Here's the cover up.
Yeah, it's just DWP.
D-dubs.
It's just D-dubs.
All right, I'm not finding it, but I'm gonna botch it potentially a little bit, but it's an important one. So he says that the phenomenon can kind of act like a thermostat in a house, right? So when the temperature gets too high, right, the air conditioning kicks on. When the temperature gets too low, the heat kicks on, right? And that's like the phenomenon coming and working within humanity to kind of keep it at a certain like consciousness temperature, right? Sure. So we can identify and say it's getting hotter, it's getting colder, but we're only saying 50% of the story. We're not able to say it gets hotter because the thermostat is adjusting, it gets colder because there's heat outside or whatever. So we are not even understanding why the mechanism of the phenomenon needs to work the way it works. We have an incomplete understanding of its purpose.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I feel like the analogy of the, scientist working on the animal is so apt. Like, we have no problem killing chickens for sandwiches. You know what I mean? Like, why are we thinking that any being who's above us is going to look at us and be like, oh, I need to behave this way to that animal?
Totally.
We're just another being. Like,
we're just another being.
And we're at the bottom of this totem pole, so...
And there was one of the stories that was told, one of the testimonials of an abduction was when it was released to the media, I think was said in a really frightening way. But when you go back to the source material, he actually wanted to be like kidnapped again. It was not an unpleasant or scary experience. And in fact, many of the abductees or folks who've interacted with the phenomenon don't necessarily say that it was negative. Some describe it as a really euphoric feeling. It's like, all of the ways that we describe religion are ways in which many folks describe the phenomenon when they interact with it. Yeah. And two people can interact with the same exact phenomenon and have a completely different way of seeing it. The parallel story that's told in both encounters and Invisible College is the story of Fatima, right, when she appeared in Portugal. And in fact, again, why it was important to talk about both tonight is that a lot of the stories that he tells, she kind of rehashes in American Cosmic and in Encounters as well. So in the Fatima story, it's like the little children saw a woman. The adults heard a buzzing. Or some people didn't have anything at all, or some people like saw a dark cloud, or they saw like an apparition of smoke. So everyone had like a little bit of a different interaction with the exact same thing, which gets back to what is reality? Or if you need something to be a material reality, what if that material reality doesn't look the same for everyone? Then where do we go, right? So we don't even have a consensus on what material reality is when something is made manifest.
Yeah, again, we are still figuring that one out. And there's a whole other thread to this whole topic that would suggest maybe there's an entire branch of physics that is deliberately being hidden in some bunker somewhere. Yeah. And we're just toiling around up here with 1950s shit. Yeah. Which wouldn't be too crazy.
Yeah, no, we are. And the other thing, too, not to jump too far ahead, but it kind of segues into this, is you can't talk about encounters or anything with this phenomenon, particularly with Diana Walsh Pasulka, without talking about the allegory of the cave. Yeah. Plato's allegory of the cave, which is summarized probably badly. It's like if there's a group of people that are staring at a wall and there's a fire behind them, and the puppet masters are making images and things on the wall, and people perceive that as being reality. When one person gets up out of the group and turns around and walks out of the cave into the sunlight, and it's even more real than the cave reality, when that person goes back into the cave, they oftentimes get murdered for being like, come out of the cave with me, let's go see. It's like, people don't like that, so...
They sure don't.
No, they don't. So the allegory of the cave is both brought up in her book, and James Madden brings it up quite a few times, and James Madden works closely with Diana Walsh Pasulka as well, and has appeared on the same podcast she has. So I feel like that's kind of a conversation. They refer to the cave allegory a lot.
Well, again, it's super apt. It relates to so many layers of our current experience in 2024 reality, but especially with relation to this shit, because of the again, ontological shock component of it. Yeah. Definitely, revealing to people that politics is more theatrics than it is politics. Most people are kind of at the point where they're like, yeah, okay, I can see that. I don't know if I buy into it, but I can see that. But this one, no. This people still get very kind of tense about. Jacques Vallee probably had his own set of concerns, but she absolutely has hers.
Definitely. Yeah, she says on page 160, and this is, goes beautifully to what you're talking about with government. She says, as stated in previous chapters, Project Blue Book was an ongoing program that had as one of its goals the public debunking of experiencer reports, which is why people are so gun-shy to talk about anything. She says, I was prepared to understand that this is true, especially because it has been declassified, but I was not prepared for the extent of the systems of management, nor for the sophistication and the level of reach to these systems.
They've been doing this a long time.
They've been doing this a really long time. But that's also, it's such a disservice to the larger human community to prevent thoughtful academic discourse about it. But the only reason I could think that they don't want that is because they have found one of the golden eggs of the goose, and they're like, if there's more gold, we want it. We're not sharing it with anybody else.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
100%
right there.
It.
Yeah.
So, again, and this is why Moon Girl, which is one of my favorite chapters in the book. Moon Girl, by the way, was one of the technopreneurs that she goes to interview. This woman Simone is her real name. She's invested in startups. She's worked with Department of Defense. She has done all of these things. And she talks about, she's not anti-AI. I am not anti-AI. I'm afraid of what AI could be in this society. I'm afraid of what AI could do when AI consolidates people's jobs and takes 10 jobs and makes them one. And there's no social services to support all of those other people that have lost work. You will have anarchy, which isn't good for anybody. It's not good for anybody, including the people who have all of it, right? So that's a really important thing to consider. But again, I go back, the plus side of it, and something that Moon Girl or Simone postulates is the potentiality that with the AI, redactions become superfluous. And so this egalitarianism of knowledge and esoteric things, right, will potentially become just a free-for-all of like, here's everything. Help yourself. Help yourself to all the information that you want.
Well, I've been saying this for a while, too. We already have a version of that called Google. Yeah. And most people won't Google the answer to a very simple question that they have. So, yeah. AI being able to unredact shit, AI being able to summarize or collate large numbers of data, yeah, for sure. But ultimately, it's always going to come back to what's the human doing with this?
Right. Well,
what is the human doing with that?
Simone says something. She goes, as anyone who has played with any of the AI generative tools for images or words knows, the prompt given or the question asked are almost more important than the answer. So this gets into like again the initiation rituals and things like that. Like you have to go through the right order and know how to kind of unlock the door. This is like the human seeking initiation, the knowledge, the upgrade, if you will. And she goes furthermore to say, and this is an extremely humbling concept, but she says, intelligence above all will find a way. The species doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's almost laughable, but it's like all of this evolution for humanity might just have been to create AI, which is the next iteration of what humanity is. That could be the next evolutionary step. We are creating our next
replacement,
phase, basically.
it's going to be way better at everything than we are. So,
maybe. Yeah. I mean, have you seen the thing where they're talking about how with image generation, it's actually gotten worse because of AI? Because now it's like a messy mishmash. Like it's no longer pulling from, better sources. It's like pulling from AI. So it's just like getting
more fucked.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's just brown. Everything is just brown now.
Yeah. Well, again, it's only as good as the data that its large language model represents.
Right.
So, this is crazy, man. Like, we're gonna see some real crazy shit in the next couple years. This stuff isn't too far off. Just looking at how fast AI is kind of caught up to shit. I utilize AI. I love AI, and I absolutely think that the only way that humanity figures it out and survives as a whole is if we utilize AI. I don't know exactly in what way, but AI is going to be a very necessary tool for crunching the numbers on what we need to do to fucking fix this shit, or at least, band-aid it until we can get enough off-planet shit going. But AI is essential. I get everyone's fears, but whether it's our replacement or not, whether it's the next form of evolution or not, we need it. We're at the point where the problems have gotten so great that we need something that can operate in a level above humanity. I
agree, and I do also think that having social protections in place for people who are a casualty of AI is also going to be very important to maintain social structure and peace. We've seen how social strife can happen when people have a lot of time on their hands, like looking at COVID. We had a lot of things going on at that time with people who were at home stewing, couldn't go out, couldn't work, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. So it's like when you have that, dissension builds really, really quickly. And I think it's important to take care of our human community as we continue to evolve technologically as well.
Well, and I also, it's like technology. What is that? What is that? When I think about technology, I used to think about robotic things and things that require like a mechanism to work. But the more abstract I get about it, the more I want to say there were all sorts of technologies. There's technologies going back to the ancient times. And a lot of those technologies were fucking right then. They were already 100% understood then. And they're still used today. Why are they not in more use or more wide use? Not everything from ancient times is completely useless to us now. And maybe this is a relevant area for you to start talking about what you're doing now.
Sure.
Just for a little bit, because I know you said you don't want to get too deep into it, but I do think I do definitely want to give you a chance to tell the people what you're doing now, so that they know where to check it out. And then at some point, whenever you're ready, at some point in the future, we'll do a whole episode on this. But I think that this is a thing that people have been using for thousands of fucking years. This is some shit people have been doing with success to benefit your lived human experience. This is a form of from my personal perspective, whatever is occurring in the layer above us, there's gonna be some component of like sound or vibration in either communication or operation of their technology. Sound is gonna play a part, and this would be probably a good spot for you to talk about what you're doing.
So I had worked in the film industry for 15 years and was a casualty of the writer's strike, and was very fortunate to get to work for like just the most wonderful, beautiful friend of mine, who is a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner who has her own nursing corporation. So I've been working with her doing marketing and admin assistant work and things like that. But I myself have been, a dancer and a flexibility coach and a mover my whole life. and wanted to sort of deepen that practice because I've seen how much people benefit from group movement, somatic healing, you know, not just talk therapy, but movement therapy is super important. So the last 6 months, as I was working with her, it's hard not to be inspired by her and what she kind of stands for. I started putting together a different take on a class that I wanted to lead. I've been a meditation practitioner for 5 years, doing my own practice. I started doing sound bowls about 4 years ago and really enjoyed it, but really got into it, I would say, in the last 12 months and wanted to make a concerted effort of studying it and putting something together with a class. So my certifications are mostly in, flexibility, movement training, things like that, but I've also pulled in meditation and sound bowls, vibrational healing as a way of working through the entire body. So every Monday night from 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific time, we run a class via Zoom. So you can keep me in your pocket and take me anywhere on a Monday night if you can't sleep. But I wanted to focus a class on sleep hygiene because it's really important. People don't sleep enough. So we do 30 minutes of very light kind of yin yoga type stretching, 10 minutes of guided meditation to kind of bring the body down. We've worked out all the nervous energy and gotten it out of a physical form, bring the mind down a little bit, and then sort of prime the system to receive vibrational healing and sound, right? If nothing else, sound baths are so cool because for me, the sound becomes the only point of focus. There's nothing else outside of it, right? It's like the only thing I've known and the only thing I will know, and then it just like completely numbs my mind from all of the busy thoughts. So that's the intention of the class. People have, I think, really enjoyed it that have taken it with me. Most of the folks who come are, students I've had in person or folks I had online over the pandemic. But if anyone across the country wants to join, I will send you the link and you can maybe drop it below in the description. So
we'll definitely have it there.
Great.
Put your Instagram too, for sure.
Yeah.
I also want you to just kind of quickly say, what do you think the most powerful part about of the things you've learned so far on this path? What do you think is the most like powerful piece of like, oh shit, this is effective?
For my own practice, you mean in terms of like the class that I'm leading, or are you talking about the books?
Oh, it could be both, but really for the sound bowl stuff.
Yeah. For me, I had a really profound revelation when I was meditating, and I'm like, I'm terrible at this. Also, everyone's bad at meditating, just so everyone knows. Like, meditation is not something that comes naturally to,
Westerners.
Westerners. Thank you. So, there was a night where Justin, my boyfriend, was doing something and I was irritated. And I had this moment where I stopped and I was like, you are irritated. Do you want to pursue this grumpiness, or do you want to just let it go and like speak calmly about it, or like take a breath and then address it? And I chose the latter, and I was like, oh, that's meditation. That's meditation. Meditation is about the moment of choice. I think people conflate like, oh, you're so chill because you meditate. Hopefully the objective is to maybe proceed with less reactive behavior, but conflating less reactivity with being chill, they're not the same thing. It is really to say we practice choice, we practice non-reactivity, we practice taking the moment before you decide what it is you're going to do, because patterns of behavior are really powerful, and to make changes in your life, you have to make changes in your patterns first. And so the way that, for me, why Encounters is such a beautiful interplay with all of this is that, again, with this topic of epigenetics, and that as you have circumstances, whether it's a meditation class or a UFO encounter, if you have something that can change the way that you see the world and that you interact with it for the better, what a beautiful, magical way of proceeding through your daily walk as a human being, right?
That's such a wonderful sentiment. It could. That is such a perfect way to button up this episode. And I heard you suggest maybe that you were gonna do some sound bowls to hear us out.
Yeah.
Fucking sick, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you to Kaylin for joining us. Kaylin, any last words before I kick it over to you to sound bowl us out?
I would just say check in with the breath. Take a moment to try to find the space between the inhale and the exhale. See if you can notice the space between the bottom of your nose and the top of your lip. And just see if you can focus more on breath and less on thought. Love that. Okay.
Love that. And don't forget mints. Don't forget breath mints. Those are important too.
Yeah.
All right, I'm making you.
I'm going to mute myself, and then I'm going to make sure you can hear me when I come back.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm going to turn off my mic and my video right now.
Killer, yeah.